Jakob Ingebrigtsen just destroyed the field in the Monaco Diamond League, breaking his own European record to storm to a blistering 3:26.73, one of his most special and dominant performances coming from an already dominant athlete. And this is even more incredible when you think about the history he's had this season. Coming off an Achilles injury in January, which seems to have affected him a decent amount. Of course, he wasn't in perfect form when it came to the Bowerman Mile. Kerr was able to beat him in what I wouldn't say is necessarily a comfortable way, but it wasn't like a neck and neck race, which really forced Kerr to put in the work to win that race. And ever since then, he's just been building up that fitness consistently. I looked at a couple of the post-race interviews and he said that he didn't really have a national record particularly in mind or a world record, but he was feeling strong and he was feeling good. He talked about having a gut feeling that you just feel strong in training, because of course he has that famous double threshold training where he doesn't go all out in his training sessions. He tends not to know what sort of form he's in, and he was saying that this is kind of a good tester for him. But that has sent a message to everyone in the field, and I think Josh Kerr is going to be watching that very, very closely, because right from the beginning no one was really challenging him. You saw Chariot and Nuguse try and go with him and try and keep up with that pace, and they were kind of able to hold on for about 1,000 maybe 1,200 meters. But if you look at Jakob going down the back straight in the last lap, you can see he's looking pretty comfortable considering his running form is still strong, he's looking determined, and you see Nuguse in the background and he's crying out. He is in hell right now. The lactic is clearly hitting hard for him, and whilst Chariot was keeping up in second place, he started to fade around that back straight point, and this is kind of a mistake that I think Chariot especially makes. Although he did come second and got a very fast time, I think it was also a season best for him. It was around 3:28. I've noticed that sometimes when racing Jakob in recent years, he spends a lot of energy on that duel with Jakob and essentially just tries to go with someone who's a lot fitter than him. What Kerr and Whiteman have shown is that the way to beat Jakob isn't by running his own game. If you run his own game, then you're going to lose because Jakob is just fitter than you. I think he's definitely got a very strong argument that he's the fittest 1500 meter athlete in the world right now. So trying to beat him by playing his game whilst he just winds up the pace on you and watches you drop slowly is never really going to end up well for you, especially because apart from the Oslo Diamond League, Chariot hasn't exactly had a stellar season. So if he can't expect himself to keep up with Jakob on a good day, how's he going to be able to do it whilst coming off of a fairly mediocre season thus far? Even though Chariot is of course an amazing athlete. The best way to beat Jakob is by trying to stick behind him and then out-kicking him in the final 200, because as insane as Jakob's fitness is, he hasn't got the most lethal kick in the world. The problem is that Jakob is so fit most of the time, he takes the sting out of most people's kick. I think Eugene 2022 is an excellent example of how to beat Jakob in particular for the other athletes, because he wasted a lot of his energy dueling with Chariot, and that allowed someone like Jake Whiteman, who whilst is fit, is definitely not as fit as Jakob Ingebrigtsen, to save his energy and be able to outkick him in the final 200. Jakob himself admitted that that was a tactical failure on his part, and you saw at the start of this race that the athletes kind of just let him go to the front. They never really challenged him, they never really roughed him up. If I was a 1500 meter runner faced with the task of beating Jakob Ingebrigtsen, then the first thing I would do is get to the front as quick as I can and make the pace as awkward and variable as possible. Of course, much easier said than done. He's still so fit that he can probably handle that for 99% of people anyway. But whilst I think Jakob's performance was so dominant that I don't think anyone would have really been able to beat him tonight, the runners didn't exactly make it difficult for him by letting him go to the front and just do his thing. On another note, we also saw some interesting performances by the Brits. I mean, everyone had a really fast race because Jakob was kind of pulling everyone along with that pace. Neil Gourley had a very strong performance. He had almost close to personal best, I think it was, getting into that 3:30 pace, which was nice to see. Elliot Giles, unfortunately, I mentioned him in the preview video not because of his athletic performance, but more because of the story since the Olympic trials and the fact that I like him, to be honest. But unfortunately, it seemed he had a really bad race. You can kind of see him fade fairly early on. He just wasn't able to handle that pace, and he finished in dead last with a pretty disappointing 3:40. So I wonder where he goes from here, man. Like, is it because after the last two races he had, he could be mentally broken, which really sucks to see. He's been completely blackout on his YouTube channel in the past 10 days, so we can only speculate what his state of mind will be, but I doubt it's going to be in a good place right now, so hope things go well for him. Another notable thing that happened right at the start of this race was that Neil Laros had an early fall, which is of course really unfortunate for him. Laros is kind of a wild card. He's almost like a Jakob Ingebrigtsen 2 Dutch runner, very young, 19 years old I think he is. So this guy is the same age as me and he's running in the Diamond League and I'm sitting in bed commentating about it. Fuck, I really need to sort my life out. This is like my equivalent of when people see the Euros and then they watch Jude Bellingham scoring a goal and they hear the commentators saying, "What a spectacular goal, the England star Jude Bellingham at only 20 years old." Getting some real feelings of insecurity right now. Of course, he hasn't had the best season as well. He has been struggling with injuries since February according to the commentators, and this was supposed to be one of his first races back to really test his fitness and show where he is in the 1500 meter scale. But I think, to be honest, given how many people were in this race, it was kind of inevitable a fall was going to happen, and I think this speaks to an organizational change that needs to be made by the Diamond League and other athletics bodies, because I think there were close to 16 people in the start list, maybe not even as much as 16, but I think it was like 14 at least or something like that. And if you bring 14 of the world's greatest athletes and line them up and make them race together at the start, they're of course going to jostle for position, and naturally the start of a middle distance race is going to be so chaotic, so of course there's going to be falls. I feel like race organizers need to reduce the amount of participants in each race race and limit it to a maximum of 10, at least when it comes to races where there aren't set lanes, because otherwise you're taking away so much opportunity from the athletes. They put all of this effort, train all this time, taper for the race, then there's travel expenses, going through media, going through all the pressure of a big race, all to just fall in the first 200 meters because the race organizers crammed 16 people into a race. And there are benefits beyond just being extra fair to the athletes, which is that if you reduce the number of participants in a 1500 meter race, it adds a level of competition to trying to get a start list in the Diamond League, which would give an extra level of prestige to these races. I think the whole Diamond League setup is something I want to study a little bit more and then give some analysis on, because I have seen a lot of comments saying that it is a very broken system, and it does feel a little bit random at times. But anyway, looking to the future, of course the big question on people's mind is the Olympics, and that whole Josh Kerr, Jakob Ingebrigtsen rivalry is what everyone is talking about. There's a lot of talk, of course, about the fact that this was a paced race and it also had the pace lights on, which makes it much easier for someone like Jakob to maintain a consistent pace and slowly wind it up. And of course the Olympic Games isn't going to be a paced race, so it's a lot more volatile and a lot more tactical, which suits Kerr, who has that 800 meter sprint strength, whereas Jakob of course doesn't have a lethal sprint finish like a lot of these top athletes do. And whilst I think these are valid points to consider, you can't just run a 3:26 and then not be the favourite for the Olympics. Like, that's just not how it works, I'm sorry. Jakob is clearly the most fit athlete going into this by a significant margin, and it was such a dominant performance. Maybe I'm just kind of speaking in the moment here, I'm a little bit jaded by the immediacy of his performance, but I really do feel like it doesn't even matter that the Olympics isn't paced, because he's just so much better than everyone else. Before this race I had Kerr as a slight favourite going into the Olympics. He has also been in the form of his life, breaking the British mile record of course in the Bowman mile, and he's broke a couple of the records. I think it was a 3000 meter record as well recently, and of course he's beaten Jakob the last 2 times that they faced each other. But Kerr's strategy is entirely reliant on him being able to keep up with Jakob and still have a little bit of energy left over. And if Jakob is dropping 3:26s, he's not going to be able to do that. If you look at the post-race interviews as well, Jakob was asked a little bit about paces and how he thinks it will affect that race, and he still seems to be in denial of the fact that it will have much of an effect. He gave quite a sassy response, if you will, which is a little bit worrying for him, because even if he is in supreme fitness, he does need to acknowledge the fact that this is a significant factor, and the 2 races he's lost in the World Championships didn't have any paces. But regardless, I still have him as the favourite going into it. I want to have a sit down and properly analyse who I think is going to win, and then do a video breakdown on its own. On another note as well, we had the 800 meters, which was even more blisteringly fast than the Paris Diamond League. Jamel Sajati dropped a lethal kick on current champion Marco Arop, and sprinting to the finish, breaking his own world lead by a 1/10 of a second that he only set last week. But of course the elephant in the room is that there's a lot of doping allegations flying about with many of the athletes, and I think this is a really interesting topic to talk about, especially because the 800 meter has had such a shift in these past few races. But it's something I want to dedicate its own video to, and also have a little think about it, because it's such a serious topic. Throwing around allegations of doping is something that could ruin an athlete's career, and I'm not trying to say that I can take down an athlete by making a YouTube video about them, but I want to be respectful to their careers and livelihoods and really weigh up my options and have a reason to think about it. But thank you guys very much for watching the video. Let me know in the comments if you think this cements Jakob as the favourite against Josh Kerr in the Olympics. I'll try and make sure I have that 800 meter video out very soon. But thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy training.